Hi friends, in this video we're going to talk about how you can prepare for the Duolingo English test in just 30 days. I'm going to give you 7 useful tips or strategies to help you prepare quickly for this exam. So if you're taking the exam soon, this video is going to be very helpful for you. We will jump into tip number 1 in just a second, but I want to say if you're new to this channel, hi, I'm teacher Luke from DETready.com. Our website has lots of tools and information to help you prepare for the Duolingo English test. So if you need to study more, I recommend visiting our website. There is a link below in the description. And tip number 1 then is to learn the structure of the test. So the first thing you should do if you only have 30 days to prepare for the exam is to learn the structure of the test, because the Duolingo English test is a bit different than the other exams like the TOEFL or IELTS. It's different in a few key ways. Firstly, it's a mixed skills test. So all of the questions are in one section. They are not separated by skills like on the IELTS and TOEFL. What you should know is that the Duolingo test is an adaptive test, which means that the questions are tailored to your level as you go through the test. So for example, if you keep doing well, then the questions will get harder and harder. So that's important to know. If you notice that your questions are getting more and more difficult, then maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you're doing well on the test. The next thing you should do if you only have 30 days is to learn some methods. Now, for some of the different questions on this exam, there's not really a method or a strategy you can use to improve your score, like on the vocabulary ones. You either know the answer or you don't, so the best thing to do is just to improve your English, or in this case, improve your vocabulary. But for some of the other questions, there is a method or a strategy you can use which can help you to do better on those questions. And if you only have 30 days to prepare, I recommend you practice these methods. Let me give you an example. Here we'll talk about a simple structure or method you can use for writing about a photo. For this question type, you have 1 minute to describe the photo in at least 1 sentence. But I recommend you try to write more than 1 sentence. So here's a simple structure you can memorize. Sentence number 1, you give a general overview of the photograph. For example, this picture shows 2 young women holding hands in a green field. Sentence 2, you can talk about who is doing what or what is where. You can go into more detail here. The woman on the right is taking a photo with her camera and laughing loudly. And sentence 3, if you have enough time, you can speculate. Something like, they must be best friends. As you can see here, learning a method or a structure for answering this type of question will be greatly beneficial on the exam, because you'll know how to structure your answer even before you've seen the photograph. Then you can concentrate solely on what is in the photo. Practice every day. So the point here is that you want to be able to apply the methods I've just taught you into your answers easily and quickly. When you take the test, you don't want to be using a method for the first time. Instead, you want to have already done it hundreds of times so you know how to do it exactly. This will save you valuable minutes when you take the exam. So how can you practice? Well, there are 2 ways. On the Duolingo English test, you can take an official practice test, which gives you a score at the end. That's great. Another way to practice is to use the practice platform I've made on my website. Here you can practice all of different question types lots and lots of times, and you can check your answers immediately. I think this is probably one of the best ways to prepare for this exam. There is a free and a paid version. You can find a link to it below in the description. Tip number 4 is to understand the scoring criteria. So this tip is really important for the speaking and writing questions, so the production subscore. If you want to get a good score in production, I highly recommend you look at this scoring criteria. So let's take a look together. So this is the scoring criteria for the speaking and writing questions, like I mentioned. The first 2 are all about grammar. Point 3 and 4 are about your vocabulary. Point 5 is about task relevance, so the quality of your answer. 6 is your fluency in writing and speaking. And number 7 is about your pronunciation. This, of course, is only for the speaking questions. So understanding the criteria here is really important, because now you know what you need to do to get a good score. Let's take a look at those first 2 points again, the ones about grammar. It's talking about grammatical accuracy, so how correct is your grammar, and the grammatical complexity. Do you use a range of simple and complex sentences? So you're watching this video in English, so I can assume that your English is pretty good, so your simple sentences are probably great. But I see a lot of students making mistakes or completely avoiding complex sentences. But if you want to get a good score, you need to use them well. So let me show you some quick examples here. So what is a complex sentence? Well, a complex sentence is basically linking two ideas or two simple sentences together. When making a complex sentence, you want to use one of these subordinating conjunctions. That's a fancy word for these words here on the screen. Basically, they link ideas together. So, for example, let's say you have these two ideas. Many students like playing sports. Other students prefer making art. Now, these are two simple sentences, but you want to make them complex. So you would use one of these subordinating conjunctions. These two simple ideas show a contrast, and these subordinating conjunctions are used to show contrast. We need to use one of these subordinating clauses to link these ideas together. Although many students like playing sports, other students prefer making art. The subordinating conjunction is although, and it shows a contrast between my two ideas. Notice here I did use a comma. So when you're using a subordinating conjunction at the start of your sentence, you need to use a comma before your second idea. You could also put this subordinating conjunction in the middle of the sentence, like this. Many students like playing sports, whereas other students prefer making art. If you put this subordinating conjunction in the middle of the sentence, you do not need to use a comma. So that's what a complex sentence is. You basically link two ideas together using a subordinating conjunction. There are other types of complex sentences as well, such as compound sentences. I've made videos on that in the past. Go and check my old YouTube videos. But for today, you need to remember that you need to include at least one of these in each of your speaking and writing answers if you want to get a good score in production. So if you only have 30 days to prepare for this exam, I recommend you study this carefully. Tip number 5 is to improve your vocabulary. Of course, improving your vocabulary is so important to improve your English and get a good test score. But it's especially important for the Duolingo test because the Duolingo exam has two question types specifically related to vocabulary. We have the read and select, and then the listen and select. These question types test your vocabulary directly, which is unlike the other exams like the IELTS and TOEFL. So for the Duolingo English test, you need to learn new vocabulary, you need to learn how they are spelt and how they are pronounced. Of course, learning the pronunciation will help you with the listen and select question. So how can you learn new words easily? Well, unfortunately, there's not really a simple solution to this. Reading is probably the best way, and taking notes of any new word you see. After you've written it down in your notepad, go on to an online dictionary and listen to how it's pronounced. That will help you improve your listening and your speaking. Another way is to test yourself by using word lists. The Oxford Learner's Dictionary has lots of word lists you can use at different levels to test yourself. So just go through each one and see how many you know at each level. Again, this can be found at oxfordlearnersdictionaries.com. It's a fantastic resource to improve your vocabulary. Next tip is to improve your typing speed. Now on the Duolingo English test, you do have to type quite quickly for the writing questions. For the describe a photo one, you only have 1 minute to write at least one sentence, but you should at least write 2 in my opinion. And then in the other writing question, you have to write at least 50 words in 5 minutes. But again, you should try to write more. So if you're quite slow at typing, then this could hurt your potential to get a good score because you can't write enough. A great website I use a lot to improve my typing speed is called 10fastfingers.com. On this website, you can improve your typing speed by competing with yourself or against others by typing out all of the words that they give you. It's a fun way to improve your typing speed. And the last tip is to know the score you need to get. Not every university or institution want the same score, so it's important to know what score you're aiming for before you take the exam. You can find this by going to the Duolingo test website. When you go to the Duolingo test website, click on Institutions, Who accepts the test, and here you can type the name of your university. For example, if you want to go to Warwick University in the United Kingdom, click on the link, and then you can see the requirements you need to get into this university. So an overall score of 115 with no less than 90 in each of the subscores. So those were 7 tips to help you study. I recommend you now watch this video here to practice all the questions and see some sample answers. I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much and see you soon. Bye. Hi friends, today we're going to talk about 7 really useful ways you can study for the Duolingo English test. Now, as you know, the Duolingo English test is a bit different than other exams like the IELTS or TOEFL, so the way you study for it might be a little bit different. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I do that, if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Luke, an expert Duolingo English test teacher from detready.com. Head over to that website to get more information, courses, and other useful materials to help you study for the Duolingo English test. Okay, point number one is to know the structure. So besides actually improving your English, the next best thing you can do to prepare for this exam is to get used to the structure. The Duolingo English test is quite different than the other traditional exams like the IELTS and TOEFL in a few key ways. Firstly, the time limit you get for each of the questions is significantly shorter, particularly when it comes to writing. For the write about an image question, you only have 1 minute, and then for the longer respond to a prompt question, you get 5 minutes to do that. This is much shorter than the writing questions on the IELTS and TOEFL exams. The next big difference is that the Duolingo English test is a mixed skills test. That means that the reading, writing, speaking, and listening questions are all combined together. This is quite different than the IELTS and TOEFL exams, where you have a reading section, a writing section, a listening section, and a speaking section. On the Duolingo English test, each question type actually tests usually 2 skills, and those skills are named differently as well. We have literacy, conversation, comprehension, and production. This is actually quite different than the other exams, but in my opinion, as an English language teacher, I think those subscores actually represent your skills in a much better way. But anyway, for you, the main point is that you get used to this format because it's quite different than the other exams. So how can you get used to it? Well, luckily on the Duolingo test website, there is a practice test. So just head over to the official site and you can take a practice test. This is the best way to get used to the format. And at the end, they give you an estimated score, which is super helpful to let you know if you're ready to take the test or not. So I recommend you take the test every single day, as many times as you can, just to get used to the format. I've also made full practice tests here on YouTube, so you can watch those videos as well. And my next point is to strategize. So to do well on the Duolingo English test, or in fact any test in your life, you need to be able to strategize. Firstly, you need to think to yourself, what are my strengths and weaknesses? And particularly, you need to be honest with your weaknesses. And of course, spend more time trying to improve that area. So for example, if you think your weakness is in writing, then you should be spending the majority of your study time dedicated to improving your writing. If it's vocabulary, then you should be improving your vocabulary every single day. So the first way to strategize is to realize, what am I good at and what do I need to improve the most? The second way to strategize is to know exactly what score is required of you. Universities normally require one of these 3 things. First, a good overall score, normally around 100 to 110, but some do want an overall score of 120. 2, a good overall score plus a good score in production, again somewhere around that 110 mark. And thirdly, a good overall score and a good score in each of the subscores. So for example, 110 overall plus over 100 in each of the subscores. It's really important that you know what is required of you because you can tailor your studies to hit that requirement. So how can you find out? Well, let me show you. So the first thing you do is go over to the Duolingo test website and then go up to institutions and then who accepts the test. I think this is an incredibly useful feature that the Duolingo team have provided for us. It saves so much time because you can just type in the name of the university in this search bar. So for example, let's say you want to go to the UK where I'm from and you might want to go to Bath University, which is a beautiful place. And it should take you to the university's English language requirements page. The language requirement for Bath University is 120 overall. So that's how it's done. It's really easy to go and find out, and it's vital that you know exactly what score you need before you take the test, particularly if you need to get a good score in production. And my study point number 3 will help you with that. So study point number 3 is to take some courses to help you improve your score, particularly your production score, because that's the area most students struggle with. And I have made some production courses, so I'm just going to talk about those very quickly here. So far, I've made 2 writing courses, one for the write about a topic and one for the write about a picture. I am in the process of making speaking courses, but they'll take a couple weeks. In these courses, I show you in a detailed way how to write and structure your answer. I give you lots of practice and I show you plenty of sample answers. On top of that, there are tons of PDFs you can download to help you study. So if you're at all interested in taking more detailed and organized courses with me, you can find the links below in the description. But if you're not, that's fine. I will keep making good YouTube videos for free. So definitely subscribe to this channel for that. Tip number 4 is to increase your vocabulary. So the Duolingo English test is really vocab heavy. There are 2 question types specifically designed to test your vocabulary. We have the read and choose the real word and the listen and choose. So if you have a weak vocabulary, it'll be really hard to get a good score on this test. So how can you improve your vocabulary quickly? Well, luckily there are some really useful word lists available. Now, it's important you know that these are not provided by the Duolingo test team, but nonetheless, they are extremely helpful to help you study and memorize some words really quickly. The best one can be found on oxfordlearnersdictionary.com. If you head over to that website, go over to word lists, you can find different lists at different levels. I recommend you start studying at the B1, B2 and C1 level. B1 is low intermediate and C2 is low advanced. I don't think they have a C2 list available just yet. I have put a link to this website below in the description. I highly recommend you check that out. Study point number 5 is to read, read, and read. So why should you read? Well, isn't it obvious? Firstly, it helps improve your vocabulary, it helps you improve your comprehension, and particularly for the Duolingo English test, it'll help you with one of the most difficult questions, which is fill in the blanks. The more frequently you read in English, the easier this question type will become. On top of that, reading a lot, especially about different topics, will help you with the speaking and writing parts of this test as well, because often those questions ask you to give your opinion. But if you don't know the topic, then you probably don't have an opinion about the topic. So the more you read, the more you will understand about the world and the more opinions you have to answer those questions. So what should you read? Well, of course you should be reading news articles daily, different blogs about different topics, and even people's opinions on social media like on Facebook or Twitter. But if you find reading those kind of things quite challenging, I have a better resource for you. So if you head over to the BBC Learning English website, you can find a ton of free information to help you improve your English. Particularly for reading, they do a review of the top stories in slightly more simple English. So you can read about the topics, you can learn some vocabulary, you can get an opinion about them, and it won't take you as much time or be as stressful for you. Next up, we have do your own dictation. Okay, so the dictation is another big part of this English test. You have to listen and write down exactly what you hear. Luckily for us, these days, you can do this super easily just by going on YouTube, playing a small part of the video and writing down what you hear. Then you can double check your answers by looking at the captions. This is a good and simple way to do this by yourself. Alternatively, I have made lots of videos about dictation. You can test yourself with those. And again, I do have a dictation course coming out soon. In this course, I will teach you how to use correct grammar, correct punctuation and capitalization, and provide you with hundreds of different dictation tasks, from easy to difficult. But the key point is that you practice, practice, practice. The Duolingo English test is not an easy test, but it will become easier if you practice these things every day. Next, you have to prepare mentally. Just like I mentioned in the first point, the Duolingo English test is a very fast exam. As soon as you've finished one question, the next one comes, and you usually just have a minute or you have to complete it in a very short amount of time. So you have to be prepared for that. Thinking quickly in a second language, like in English for you, is really, really hard. I know that. Actually, I live in South Korea and I speak Korean almost daily. And yeah, it's tough. It's truly exhausting. But you need to get ready and you need to do it well. So how can you get mentally ready? Well, I recommend you take the practice test every single day as often as you can. Even though a lot of the questions will be repeated if you do the practice test often enough, that's not really the point. The point is that you get ready mentally in terms of knowing the structure and getting used to the speed of the test. You can also look at your estimated score and take note Is it going up? Is it going down? If it's going down, you've got a problem, you've got to study harder. But if it's going up, then you know you're going in the right direction. So that's how I think you should be studying for this exam. If you want more writing practice, click this video here. Speaking practice, this one here. If you want organized courses, check the links below in the description. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hi friends, today's video is so important because it's all about the rules you must follow when taking the Duolingo English test. Now, after you've taken your test, you do not want to receive an email like this, or this, saying that your test could not be certified because you didn't follow all of the rules correctly. It's vital that you understand all of the rules before you take the test, and that's what this video is about. I'm going to talk about all of the rules in 3 different categories: the environment, your computer, and a list of things not to do. But very quickly, before I go over those rules, if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Luke from DETready.com. Head over to that website to find more information, some courses, and other useful things to help you study for this Duolingo English test. Okay then, well, let's start by talking about these rules. But remember that this Duolingo English test is really awesome because you can actually do it from your home. You don't have to go to a test center to take this test. But that means that you are responsible for following all of the rules that Duolingo set out. Because this test is an official and reliable test, you need to follow the rules correctly. So remember that it is your responsibility to make sure you follow these rules. Okay then, well, let me help you understand them. We'll start with the environment. So environment basically means the room you're in. You can do this at home, at an office, or anywhere you want to, as long as that room or environment follows the rules that Duolingo set out. If you head over to the official Duolingo test guide, which I will link below in the description, you can see this page. And this page is aimed to help you prepare your environment. So these are the things you need to follow. Well, firstly, you can be comfortable, so you can do this test anywhere you want to, as long as it is private. Next, you need to make sure that you're in a very quiet room, without much background noise. And you need to be sure that that room is private. You need to be completely alone in the room. Those 2 aspects of the environment are really important. You need to make sure that the room is quiet. So if you live with people, make sure they know that you're taking a test and ask them to be quiet for about 60 minutes. Also, you might live in a very loud city. If that's the case, I suggest finding a quiet time to take the test. Next, you need to make sure that you are alone in the room. You're not allowed to have any people with you. I've seen online some people suggest that you should put a mirror behind you to show the rest of your room, but you don't need to do that. Just make sure you're in a quiet room with no one else. And also importantly is about how bright the room is. So the 3rd point here, it says that the room should be bright because the proctors will need to be able to see and hear you clearly throughout the test. So make sure the room isn't too dark. So this point is really important. The room needs to be really bright like my room here so that the proctors, the examiners, can actually see your face and see your eyes. That way they can ensure that you're not cheating. If your room is really dark like this, then the proctors or the examiners, they can't see your face or your eyes, and that way they can't check if you're cheating or not. So make sure your room is really bright. So that's it with environment. Make sure you're in a quiet room by yourself and it's very well lit. Now let's take a look at your computer. There are some specific requirements you need in terms of your computer. So let's take a look at these now by going to the Duolingo Test Help Center. Again, I'll put a link to this below in the description. So here in terms of your computer, you obviously need a computer, you need reliable internet connection, and importantly, your computer must have a front-facing camera, a microphone, and speakers. So you need to make sure that your computer has all of these different features. Modern day computers, especially laptops, usually come with a good webcam, good speakers, and a good microphone. So if your laptop is new, you don't have to worry too much. But if you're using an old laptop or an old computer, you can use external things like an external webcam, an external keyboard, or external speakers. Those are all okay, but you can't use anything that covers your ears. so you can't use a headset or earphones or anything like that. We'll talk more about that in the rules section, but just to let you know, you cannot use anything that covers your ears. But you can use external speakers if your laptop or computer is too quiet. Okay, so that's the computer setup. Now let's look at a list of things you should not do during the test. Again, I will use the Duolingo Test Help Center to run you through these rules. There's a link to this below in the description. I highly recommend you go and check that out because it has all the rules like this and a lot of other frequently asked questions. It's a great source of information for you. But let's take a look here at the different rules. Okay, so here are the rules. There are a lot, as you can see. Let's start with the first one, which we've already talked about, which is that you must be in a quiet, well-lit room. We've already talked about that, so let's move on to the next one. The next one is that your ears must be visible and uncovered, and your face must be visible and unobscured. So let's just keep this simple. You are not allowed to wear anything that covers your face or your ears. So things like headsets, headphones, and those kind of things. However, if you have to wear some kind of religious head coverings, that is okay. Okay, next one. No outside materials, including mobile phones, notes, or textbooks. This is just like in a normal test center. Of course, when you go to a test center, you can't take your phone or any extra notes with you. So don't try to hide it. It is quite obvious if you look down at something. Where I think some students get confused with this one is that usually when you take a test like the TOEFL or IELTS, you are allowed to take notes to help you with your answers. But for the Duolingo English test, you are not allowed to take any notes during the test. So don't bring a pen and paper. If you do, your test will not get certified. Okay, next up, no communication with anyone else. As we talked about before, you are not allowed to talk to anyone else during the test. Make sure you are completely alone in your room. No writing utensils or paper, so basically no pens or pencils and paper. Like I just mentioned, you are not allowed to take notes during the test. And this one is the most important. Do not look away from the screen. So this is the big one. I receive a lot of emails from students saying that their test did not get certified because they looked away from their screen for too long. Duolingo will send you an email like this if that happens to you. And of course, we don't want this to happen to you. So you need to make sure that your eyes are either on your screen or your keyboard at all times during the test. You are allowed to look down when typing, but you have to make sure that your eyes are somewhere on your screen or your keyboard at all times. Of course, that's quite hard because you have to take this test for about an hour, and it's quite hard to look at your screen completely for an hour, but you need to do it. It's one of the rules. And like I said earlier, you have responsibility. It's your responsibility to make sure you follow the rules. So just do your best to try to keep your eyes on the screen or your keyboard. Luckily, if you do look away and your test doesn't get certified, usually Duolingo give you another go for free, but still we don't want that to happen. So just make sure your eyes are on your screen or your keyboard at all times. Okay, next up we have do not leave the test window for any reason. Now this one happened to me actually when I took the test. I moved my mouse cursor a little bit and it went out of the window and I had to restart the test. Basically, your mouse like this cannot leave the window. It must stay within the test window. So don't move your mouse too much. Next up, we have do not use any predictive input methods. I think this is referring to extra software like Grammarly, which can help your spelling. You're not allowed to use any software to assist you on this test. Next up, do not use any third-party web camera software. So make sure you turn that off. And don't use a second monitor or any software that enables screen sharing or remote access. Of course, you can't use two monitors because your webcam is usually in front of you. And if you have two monitors, you might look away, which means that you've broken one of the rules and your test won't get certified. So just use one simple monitor. Keep it simple. Okay, next up is that you need to speak for at least 30 seconds on the topics presented. Okay, that's an important one. So for the speaking ones, you need to make sure that you speak for at least 30 seconds and your answers need to be related to the topic. If your answers are not related to the topic, then the examiners might think that you've just memorized a response, and you will fail for that. So make sure that you speak for at least 30 seconds on the topic you are given. And next up, do not use another person's name or ID information to take the test. So those are the rules on the Duolingo test page, but actually I want to add a couple more, some things I've noticed from my Facebook group. Okay, the first one is that you should not memorize answers. If Duolingo think that you have memorized answers for the speaking and writing questions, then they're likely to fail you for that. So make sure you don't memorize answers. It's the same for the IELTS and TOEFL test too. The next one is that you should not make 2 accounts. Of course, when you take the test, you have to input your ID or password, and Duolingo will match them with your accounts. If you use 2, you will get banned. And last one, but very important one, is to do if you wear glasses. Now, this is not a rule, but sometimes if you wear glasses and you have a light in front of you, there is glare, and then the examiners can't see your eyes. If the examiners can't see your eyes clearly, they can't tell where you're looking, and they can't tell if you're looking away to cheat or something. So if you do wear glasses, make sure the lighting is above you or behind you, and there's no glare in your glasses. Okay, that's it from me, but remember, I have put some links below to the Duolingo official guide and their help page where you can read these rules more carefully. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back next week with a new Duolingo test video. See you then.